What's up, everybody? Welcome to Faith Feeders TV, where we encourage you to feed your faith and starve your doubts. It's another episode of Feed Your Faith Friday. Now, I started out 2025 ready and excited because I knew that I had to do this. I know that God has called me to teach His Word. He said, do it on Fridays. And I'm teaching, and we started with what you be holding. We talked about Hebrews 12, how it tells us to lay aside the weights and the sins, things that easily beset us. And then I had to look at myself because I never want to be that person that teaches something and does not live it or has to deal with it at home. And so I had some weights I had to let go, hence my absence. But by His grace, I'm back, and I'm back today, part 2. So we're going to talk about what you be holding. What you be holding. It's kind of play on words. What you be holding, like what are you holding on to? What have you been holding on to? But the dual purpose of that statement is, what are you beholding? What are you looking at? Because in verse 2, we want to dive into today of Hebrews 12. We have verse 1 and verse 2. So we know we lay aside the weights and the sins, things that easily beset us. And then verse 2 says, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. We talked about last time that a weight is something that makes it hard to wait. A weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, is something that makes it hard to wait. W-A-I-T. Wait on the Lord. Things that make it hard for us to wait in His presence. We're too busy. There's things that we got to do, our schedules, things that make it hard to wait and be patient and consistent and going on in our faith. What are those weights? What are those things that make it hard for us? Those are the things we have to evaluate. So we talked about going into a new year and going into a new season in life, that there are things that we're trying to do. There's goals and there's things that we want to accomplish, but we also got to be mindful of the things that we need to let go as we start in a new season, in a new year. And so let's go a little bit deeper into Hebrews 12, verse 2. What are we beholding? The things that keep us from beholding Him, things that keep us from looking at Jesus. So I want to talk about Peter. Peter's one example in Matthew chapter 14, verse 26. We know the story that they were on the boat and Jesus had stayed back to pray, and He begins walking on the water towards the boat, and the storm is out, and the disciples are like, oh my God, it's a ghost. And Jesus said, it's me, don't be afraid. Peter says, if it's you, Lord, tell me to come on out there and I will. And we know the story that Peter goes out and he's walking on water, defying gravity, the laws of buoyancy, and all those things. And as he's looking to Jesus, he's walking towards Jesus. But then it says he looked at the winds and he started to sink. So he took his eyes off Jesus, and what he was able to do by God's grace, he was no longer able to do. And so that lets us know that as long as I keep my eyes on Jesus in my storm, in my situation, as I'm doing what He's called me to do, I will stay afloat. But when I take my eyes off Him and look at the circumstances, situations, the winds, the waves of life, I will begin to sink. The one thing that always struck me is because we used to sing this song, and I mean, you know the one song, you call me out upon the water, feet may fail. Yeah, your feet gonna fail if you ain't looking at Him. But Peter had little faith. He had a little bit of faith. Jesus said, oh, you have little faith. I'm like, man, if little faith can get me to walk on water, let me have some of that little faith. But really, a little faith is inconsistent faith. It's faith that starts but not finished. Faith that looks to Jesus, and then faith that begins to look at circumstances. And we can find ourselves in those situations. We have faith to sign, faith to start, but when we get in the middle of it, and we start seeing the winds and the waves, sometimes we don't finish. And so I'm believing that as we look to Him, our faith will remain strong because Jesus is His Word. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us in 1 John or John chapter 1. So we know that Jesus is His Word. So as I look to His Word, as I look to Him, I can maintain strong faith and finish what I have started. All right, so we need to look to Jesus. So Peter walking on the water is our example. Second example is Jesus, our mirror. James chapter 1, verse 22 through 25 talks about how if we're a hearer and not a doer of the word, we're just like a person who looks in the mirror and walks away and forgets what they look like. The word is our mirror. Jesus is our mirror. We're not to compare our lives, our faith, our walk with God with anybody else. That would be self-righteousness. Our goal is to look to him and make those adjustments. Just like you look in the mirror and you fix your hair, you fix your face, you may notice a pimple. Whatever it is, you take care of those things. You make adjustments as you look in the mirror. And as we look to the word, we need to make those adjustments. We have to pay attention to what we are beholding. What are we looking at? When we look to Jesus, when we look into his perfect law of liberty, we'll be not just a hearer, but a doer of the word, because it's the doer that is blessed. It's the doer that sees results. I don't know about you. I don't want to just read the Bible. I don't want to just go to church. I want to experience God's presence. I want to experience all that is offered to us as believers. I want God's glory to manifest in our church services, on my job, in my family, in my neighborhood, in my schools, in my community. And the only way we can do that is if we are doers of the word and not just religious puppets going through the motions. All right. So Jesus is our example. But another way to look at him as our mirror is his perspective. As we look to him, have you ever been looking at somebody, and maybe it's like at a family function or a church service or something like that, and you're making eye contact with somebody, and then you can see that something has caught their eye. And especially if it's that one family member that's like really funny, has a good sense of humor, and they're looking at something, and you look at it and you're like, oh, I got, or whatever it is. And so likewise, when we look to Jesus, we can now look at his perspective and not just see things as we see them, because the way these algorithms are set up and the way the news media and social media is set up, it is built to change our perspectives. And it's so important that we keep a godly perspective in this day and age, because the devil got some tricks for us if we don't keep in mind how Jesus views things, to love what he loves, to hate what he hates, and see things as he sees them. So looking to Jesus, number 3, it helps us get his perspective on things. And then the last example really is the prophet Isaiah chapter 6. In the same year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. He was high and lifted up, and his train, the hem of his garment, it filled the temple. And seraphim were there, and they were crying, holy, holy. And you keep reading that, it's amazing, because all before that, this is a prophet of God who's declaring, woe to you, you people who are drunkards, you people who don't mean what you say, you're polluting God's temple, you're doing all these evil things, woe to you. He's given a godly, stern warning to them. But when he sees Jesus, he couldn't help but to see himself. And he said, woe is me, I'm a man of unclean lips. This is a startling statement, because this is a true prophet of God. We like to talk about false prophets, but let's look at the true prophets. He is a true prophet of God. And he said, woe is me, I'm a man of unclean lips. You mean the man who's been prophesying the word and the oracles of God is a man of unclean lips? And so no matter how long we've been saved, no matter what we've done for God or for his kingdom, when we keep our eyes on him, we will then be aware of the things that are not pleasing to him. There's always another level of holiness that we can walk into. There's always another level of holiness that we can walk into, but it's only when we look to him that he tells us what adjustments to make. And so when he said, I'm a man of unclean lips, then the seraphim came and took a coal with the tongs, touched his tongue, and he says, I remove the iniquity from you. And so when we stare at Jesus, when we look to him, we won't just be, we will never be condemned. But when we are convicted of those things, when we begin to really see ourselves, the ugly parts of ourselves, when we see those things, we also will see the solution is right there in his presence. And so I want to encourage you not to shy away, but to look to Jesus. He is our example. He's our mirror. He's the one that helps us make those adjustments so that we represent him rightly. When we keep our eyes on him, our faith will remain strong, and we'll be able to walk on water and walk in destiny. We get his perspective, and as we look to Jesus, we'll begin to see ourselves and make those adjustments and walk in continued holiness. Remember to feed your faith, starve your doubts, and next week we're going to go into part 3 of what you be holding. Be blessed.